I'd get excited a bit. Everything was so very near. June didn't seem even a little bit shy. With everything hanging out there for me to see, she was more concerned with ticks and fever than what she was doing to me. Then just as quickly, she was fully dressed again, with color back in her other cheeks. "Thanks, Don," she said, laughing. "I haven't felt better in weeks." "You're welcome," I mumbled, still in shock from what I'd seen. "Any time, June," I said, as if tick checks like this were routine. "It's really pleasant here," I said, "nice and quiet and peaceful as well. Look, the pine needles are so soft, like a bed. Maybe we could sit a spell." But she had already gotten in the car. Without acknowledging my obvious plea, I was hot-blooded, like in the song. My temperature was 103. "I know what you're thinking, Don," she said, as I inched slowly back down the lane. "You're all turned on because of the tick check, so I better explain. It's one of my few personal rules. I thought I'd explained it before. But I don't have sex with guys I don't know. That's the difference between a slut and a whore." Well, June, I thought you knew me pretty well," I said. "It seems like you can always tell what I'm thinking. You know, we've been together for nearly 3 days, and almost continuously, too," I said, winking. She giggled at my pathetic argument. I already knew my case was shot. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, Don, she said, "next time you're feeling hot." Thank you very much.
I think it's time to take a break. Let's have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to just mingle, have some food, talk to each other, and then we'll come back for Wayne Burke and a different kind of trip. Thank you. So just want to remind you that we have books for sale at the counter, and authors will be signing them afterwards. So it's good for us to support each other in all ways, not just by listening. There's also the rest of life, not by bread alone, right? So our second feature reader and final one for tonight is someone we've been waiting for quite a while to feature. He's had his books here at the store for a couple of years. And we just started the reading series six or 7 months ago. And, you know, it's quite a juggling act to put people together, to try to figure out a theme that will encompass both readers. And I feel that it's kind of more interesting when we do that. So here we have our beat influence. And Wayne definitely writes in the beat spirit. And I know that the beat authors are very close to Steve's heart. So it's a pretty special reading all together tonight, with all of us gathered here. So Wayne F. Burke was born in Adams, Massachusetts, and raised by his paternal grandparents. As a boy, he was an all-star baseball player, and in high school, an all-Class A football player. He attended the University of Massachusetts, where he was a member of the freshman football team, and then 3 other institutions of higher learning, before graduating from Goddard College in 1979. From reading his poetry, I would say that Goddard was probably the best choice you could make. His work history includes stints as a bartender, moving man, cook, machine shop operator, sign painter, substitute school teacher, carpenter, truck driver, book reviewer for the Burlington Free Press newspaper in Burlington, and for the past 4 years, LPN in a nursing home. His stories, essays, reviews, and poems have appeared in numerous publications. He has 2 other collections of poetry published by Bareback Press, Words That Burn in 2013 and Dickhead 2015. He will be reading from his most recent book, just published, Knuckle Sandwiches. You're the first to hear it. Let's give a hand to Wayne. Yay.
Hi. Kerouac was one of the great language innovators in prose in the 20th century. I did enjoy everybody's reading, and I would like to thank Steve, Miriam, Trish, and Bea for putting this together. and I'm going to read a couple poems. Donuts. I got off work at 3 in the morning after working another 12-hour shift, and I drove my car to the P&C market, where I turned a few donuts on the ice before I parked and got out and walked to the door, where some guy who stood looking at me said, "I don't care how old you are, don't pull donuts in the lot." And I said, "Fuck you." And he blinked behind his cockeyed glasses, and I followed him inside and asked if he'd heard what I said, but he did not reply, and I went about my shopping, too tired to give a shit or take any either. Stabbed. I told her while we were lying in bed, told her it was over. She started to weep, and I wanted to comfort her, but could not, would not, and got up and went out to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, and she came out of the room a little later, dry-eyed and without any clothes on, but not really naked, and said, "If I had a knife when you told me, I'd have stabbed you." And how glad I was then that I had told her in bed and not in the restaurant. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I'm not hearing myself. Okay. Last kiss. Moving from mouth to mouth, kissing every girl in the bar. Their boyfriends stand aside and stare, and one bitch has a fit after I smack her lips, and soon I am outside and lying on the sidewalk beneath a tree and listening to wind rustle through the leaves. And if God has a voice, that is it, the soothing shush and rush of sibilance, the whispered hush and sudden gust of exhaled breath, calming me, but not enough, because later I climbed the side of a building and broke in through a third-floor window and came to, sitting on a bed in a dark room, and heard the footsteps of a giant outside the door, which flew open to let a cop in, who handcuffed me so tightly the cuffs stayed on my wrist for years. Les perdus, the lost. I am lying on the beach, no one else around, when a little girl appears, tears rolling down her cheeks. Pourquoi? I ask, and she replies in French. I search for words to answer. We have a conversation, of sorts. Vous parlez anglais? No, she does not. Où votre mère et père? Je ne sais pas. Lost her parents and is at a hotel, but does not know which. Name is Nicolette. Takes 5 minutes to get this out. My tongue fumbling for words. I spot 2 guys and a woman walking past and call, "Messieurs, Madame, un moment," and they come right over. Quiz the girl. "Thanks," one of the frogs says in English. "We'll take it from here." Fruit of the loom. After having had the shit kicked out of me in a bar in Central Square, I walked alone up the sidewalk bricks toward Harvard and the Charles River. The few people I met gave me a wide berth after a gawk at my face, which must not have looked pretty. And I reached the riverbank and took my pants off, then underwear, which I began to wash out, but thought, hell with it, and threw them into the swirling dark, where they were later found by an oarsman rowing in a regatta. Speared at the end of an oar like a white fish. Species unknown. hot summer. After an hour or two of making out with her, I would have a hard-on like a bar of soap, but she would never touch it, or even acknowledge that I had more in my pocket than loose change. And when her mother coughed twice from the living room, it was time for her to go into the house, and me to walk home beneath the moon with my piece of rebar that I never used for anything that summer except piss out of. Never had a room. Never had a room of my own until I was 16. Always had a bed. My two brothers and uncle had beds too, in the same room. My uncle came home late, stomping upstairs and falling into bed like a tree trunk into empty cans. His snores were like a language of the deaf and dumb. In the morning he retched into the toilet, then stumped to his bed, fat man on popsicle stick legs, and sat to put on his gas station uniform, grunting as he bent to tug up socks. A bastard he could be, who gave me backhanded slaps and kicks from size 10 shoes, and once whipped me with his belt as I squirmed on the backyard lawn, howling loud enough for the neighbors and the world to hear, but they never did. Ballantine. Some of you remember Ballantine Ale? And I'm losing my voice. Ballantine. Whenever I drank Ballantine Ale, I got mean. Or maybe I was already mean. I don't know. I don't think so. But anyway, one day, not long ago, after emptying several of the green bottles, I got it into my head that this big guy who had an ugly face I'd seen around town had somehow done me wrong. And I saw the guy on the opposite side of the street, and I screamed, "You, get over here," like I was talking to a dog. And the guy stared, and I started across the street, and he ran fast. As I chased him to a house he ran inside of, and I followed up a staircase to a door where the guy stood holding an axe, and I backed slowly down the stairs and left just as cops arrived in their shiny car that I got a free ride in. Steve mentioned Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor's in here. Moving man. I worked a day laborer job as moving man and carried box after box of books out of a professor's house and into a truck on a tree-lined street in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The guy working with me took it easy, and carried out about half of what I did. And at one point, I told the guy, "Get a move on," and he looked at me like I was crazy, and maybe I was. And late in the afternoon, the truck driver gave me some shit for slowing down, and I went off on him, a screaming fit. And he blanched and said that he knew what my problem was and handed me an extra 10. But lack of money was not my real problem. The world was. The Girl and the Greek. She was a good girl, but headstrong, had to have her own way. And one day her boss in the restaurant underpaid her by $10, and she went and opened the cash register and took out a 10. And the boss, a Greek with a bushy mustache, grabbed her, and I grabbed him, slammed him against the wall, tore the buttons off his shirt, and asked, as I held him by the throat, did he want to fuck with someone? And he said, "No." Very humbly and unbosslike, and I let him go. And then the girl and me, we went back to our place and fucked. Turkey. The kids shouted as they circled me on the schoolyard playground, "Turkey gobble gobble, turkey gobble gobble." It was Thanksgiving. Because I was a Burke, I was also a Burkey, which some evil kid had translated to turkey. a name I disliked. I was sensitive to slights. I ran at them, and they scattered, but shouted even louder, a hellish chorus, faces gleeful with malice, turkey gobble gobble. One kid was slow to move, and I caught him with a punch. He was in the retarded class, taught in the basement, and it was rumored he had a tapeworm. We fought it out. He was tough, and with a head hard as wood. The fight went on a long time before he said, "I give." Afterward, they did not call me Turkey again. Not to my face, anyway. The Long Walk. Some of you remember Manpower? Manpower? Yeah. Used to send you out to work and they would take half your pay. The Long Walk. Another manpower job where they send you out to work and take half your pay. Only it wasn't a bad job, this one. Mixing paints. Putting the cans into the arms of a machine and watching the machine jiggle like a belly dancer. I got off at 4 and started to hitchhike, but could not get a ride, and all the drivers looked smug like bastards, laughing at me, and I thought, fuck you assholes, I will walk. And I started to walk, my back to the traffic, cars going past at 60, the bastards. I was pissed. Even if a car stopped, I would not get in. I marched like one of Caesar's soldiers going to meet the Gauls, sweating out my ass. It was hot, hazy, no breeze. People moved out of my way. I must not have looked normal. I wasn't normal. I was pissed. I walked 10 miles back to the place. A girl who lived in the apartment asked how I got back, and I said I walked. She had a Mid-Eastern look and was screwing a black guy from Detroit who smoked pot and did not talk. Me, I wasn't screwing anyone except myself. Another working poem. Half a Cop. I was hitchhiking through Framingham, Massachusetts, and the guy who picked me up gave me a job as security guard at the Ford auto plant, where I sat all night in a tiny shack and checked trucks in and out, and on slow nights read a book and put my feet up on the desk and sometimes smoked pot. My job was to step out and raise a long aluminum pole to let trucks in. One night I woke in an earthquake, the shack trembling from the idle of a 12-wheeler loaded with cars, and I stepped out, half asleep, as I lifted the bar. The truck started through, and I lost my grip, and the pole fell over the cab and bent in the shape of a horseshoe. The truck driver had several kinds of fits. Some guy ran up to me and screamed in my face, and the lights came on like the start of World War III. I stayed awake the rest of that night, going out now and then to raise the bent pole just a little higher. Showdown. As I lifted weights in the cellar, I listened to the floorboards overhead creak from the weight of my uncle's feet. I thought of my fist landing in the middle of his fat face. His days as boss man were past, and he knew it. And one morning in the kitchen, as I combed my hair, which I had let grow long, he asked when I was going to get a haircut. And I said, never. And he flinched like he'd been slapped and stared, black-eyed, with the glare that used to pin me to the floor like a rabbit. But this time I glared back, and we stood with the sun burning the roof above and the years piled up between us. And then he turned his head and with a sick smile fled out the door as gutlessly as every other bully who ever ran. My last one. Or no, two. Two more. Wife beater. The jail cell was thin and long. I sat at one end, and a wife-beater sat at the other. The wife-beater paced the floor back and forth. He was tall and thin and had crazy eyes. Whenever he came near, I stared him down. I wondered if I would have to beat on him. Maybe that was why they put me in there. I did not care who he had beat. I had no opinion on his case. Hell, I wasn't even married. Okay. Frozen. We had stopped at Hardee's Burgers on our way back to the college, and some high school hotshot wearing a football jacket in the parking lot punched Phil in the face. Splat. And Phil grabbed the guy by the guy's collar and shouted, "Cut it out!" But the guy kept punching his fist. Splat, splat, splat. And Phil shouted louder, "Cut it out!" But the guy did not stop, and blood began to drip down Phil's face. And I said, "Hit him! Hit him, Phil!" But Phil only screamed, "Jesus Christ, stop it!" And the guy's fist splat, splat, splat. The blood, a beard down Phil's shirt. And finally the guy stopped, and Phil let go. And back in the car, where Steve and Ron had sat during the fight, Phil was asked, "Why didn't you hit him?" And Phil, a bloody mess, bawling and blowing bubbles out his nose, said, "I don't know." I'm going to end with this one. Wake up. I just woke from a nap. An hour in an afternoon. Dark with clouds and rain. Get up, I told myself. There is much to do. Like read all of Proust. Visit Niagara Falls. And eat. And drink. And look out the window at the sky, opening to immensities of space beyond the dark and dreary seeming day, which is, in a way, quite beautifully somber, pitched in gray, charcoal, smoke, white slather of clouds, and sheen of rain on metal roof, seen from the window of this APT. Thank you.
Wow. What a great reading. Very, very original. Thank you. Kerouac would approve. Brings me back to my working class neighborhoods that I grew up in and the people that I knew, all of whom had many dimensions to their character. So really thank you very much, Wayne, for making the 2-hour drive. Wayne's from Barrie, so it's quite an effort, and he's got a long ride home, so I hope that you'll have a little bit of time to talk with people and sign some books before you leave. So listen, guys, thanks so much for being here. It was a really spectacular reading. We still have refreshments, and anyone who has the spirit to stay and chat, and just keep sharing.
Can I point out above the safe is the typesetter equipment that my dad learned to be a typesetter on.
Really?
That is the keyboard.
Really?
Every job I've ever had and to the bookstore.
Well, I think that deserves a private tour. So private tours are available. Thanks again for coming, and hope we see you the next time. Thanks a lot.